gasoline, wood-fired stoves and stuff. That's a huge problem. So, if we don't stop this, let's have a look about how some of the cities around the world will look like if the sea level rises. Once they found out about the climate change, about the climate crisis, they formed an intergovernmental panel on climate change, the IPCC. Every year they come up with a report, and every year the report is getting worse and worse and worse because the governments are not doing anything. The governments of the world, they meet every year at a COP, Conference of the Parties. Guess how many years they've already been meeting and talking? Anybody remember in Glasgow, which numbers of COPs was it? 20? Yes, very good. 26 years they've been talking. You know what Greta calls that? Blah, blah, blah. They keep talking and talking. They agreed about 10 years ago to 1.5 degrees, but we heard that right now, with their plans right now, we're going to go to 2.8 degrees. And you saw what's going to happen at 2.8 degrees, 3 degrees, it's going to be terrible. If we exceed just 1.5 degrees, they're estimating that 3 billion people will be either die, which most likely they won't, they will start walking. They will start walking away from the equator, mostly north, to USA and Canada. So Trump talking about the wall to Mexico, they will build the wall, for sure. Europe, having barbed wire in some of the countries of the migrations from the war-torn Afghanistan, Syria, and Africa, and the people going over the Mediterranean Sea on little boats. There are going to be millions of people, hundreds of millions of people going away from the equator, mostly north, some of them south, to where it's cooler. Because at 35 degrees Celsius, and I think 80% humidity, wet bulb effect happens. What that means is that we cannot control our temperature with sweat anymore. And that means we cannot stay outside longer than 1-2 hours. We will die of overheating or heat stroke. And that will happen at the equator first, and it will gradually expand as it gets hotter. So this is the predictions. We talked about it, 2.8 degrees. Here are the tipping points. We talked about one tipping point. Remember the Theiss Glacier? If it breaks off, in 3 years, most likely, 60 centimeters. If the other glaciers around it break off in 10 years, 3 meters. And that's just one tipping point. Other tipping points are permafrost, like in Siberia or in Canada. The ground is frozen all year around, but not anymore. Now it thawns, right? It melts in the summer, and then the biological processes, the microbes are starting to convert the organic matter, and then massive amounts of methane goes into the atmosphere. We talked about CO2. There's another greenhouse gas called methane. It's up to 80 times worse than CO2. Has 80 times more heat-trapping properties for the atmosphere than CO2. Gas, when you talk about gas, liquid gas or gas fiber, that's methane. In the methane production and delivery and the stoves, usually 10% is just leaking everywhere. And it goes into the atmosphere, and it's terrible, even worse than CO2. Let's see about these people talking about the tipping points.
One way create a lot of good things, but at the same time, we create a lot of problems.
The warming of the earth and the warming is causing a further warming.
Most people I know haven't even heard of feedback loops or tipping points, but they are so crucial to understanding how the world works.
As we started models in the late 50s, we could find the climate changing in a pretty huge way.
Scientists have identified dozens of feedback loops already in motion. Each amplifies warming, and combined, they are spinning out of control.
There were places where we walked where my foot fell into the ground because there was no longer any ground structure, because the permafrost was thawing.
Where we are now is like driving in a car in a dense fog, and you know there's a cliff out there somewhere, but you don't know where. Do you want to be going 60 miles an hour, or should you be going about 10 miles an hour?
The Earth will be just fine. We may take along with us, unfortunately, lots of different species. I'm not worried about the planet, I'm worried about us.
If we take action now, we could slow, halt, or even reverse the climate crisis before it's too late.
I'm optimistic by nature, and I become more optimistic when I see so many people that realize there's a problem.
We can't allow it to be too late.
It's time to act.
If we don't, the planet will reach a tipping point, where we will lose the world as we know it.
We really have an emergency right now. Let's have a quick look at how Sri Lanka is doing. Sri Lanka is a very small country. Less than 0.01% of the global CO2 is coming from here. So you're not the ones responsible. The most responsible are the G20 or the G7 countries, the big industrial nations that have been pumping out CO2 for the last decades. So Sri Lanka actually has acknowledged the problem as part of the COP, the conference, and your president has been there, has done a talk. The reporting is going well, but all the other measures that Sri Lanka should be doing are a little bit lagging behind. So there should be a lot more action. So there's a lot of talk and very little action. What was interesting, countries are now saying, like, at what year are we going on net zero? At what year are we not going to burn any CO2, produce not any CO2 anymore? And typically, Germany 2045. Sri Lanka was 2060, but at the last COP, your president has said, oh, we want to achieve this by 2050. Great, 10 years earlier, very good. And I looked at and I researched a little bit, where do you get your energy in Sri Lanka? And actually, the vast majority of energy in Sri Lanka is renewable and sustainable. It's hydrothermal and renewable here. And this is coal and this is oil. So about 37% of your energy is by burning oil and coal. And this basically has to go to zero. And there's a nice video, the link is in the notes of the section, where your president is having a speech at the COP. And he's saying all the right things. And here's another scientist, Dr. Rohan Pettiyagoda. A very good talk about Sri Lanka and climate impacts, if you're interested, also on YouTube. And Sri Lanka also has a climate change secretariat. Unfortunately, it has updated last time 5 years ago, this page. So, good intentions, all the right information there, but in the last 5 years, nothing has really happened. The problem is, and there are solutions, there are plans, there are things that Sri Lanka can do, but they're not being implemented. The argument of the government is because you're having an economic crisis and people are suffering, people are hungry, people are out of job, people don't have any money, they have to fix that first and then we worry about the climate. Which is a good argument and it's true. The only thing is many countries have problems like this, like Sri Lanka. If all the countries are saying we're only going to fix our economy first and then the climate, it will be too late. We have to try to fix both. But to be really honest, the G20, they have to do China, Russia, US, Europe, they have to do the bulk of it. Sri Lanka is only a small part. But you can still do something. It was also interesting that the president said they're going to be carbon neutral or net zero by 2050. But at the same time, right now, they're investing 167 billion worth of oil and gas investments in Sri Lanka. So it's kind of weird. You want to be no more oil and gas by 2050, but at the same time, you're spending 167 billion into new gas. And the reason they're doing that is to pay the government debt, which is also a good argument you can't really argue with. So it's difficult. But let's have a look at the solutions. How can we solve the climate crisis? Now you've gotten all the scary bits. Let's have a look at the positive things. How can we solve it? How do we solve the climate crisis? There are 3 buckets okay, 10 minutes. 3 buckets of solutions. Nature, the system in that we operate, the structure, the society, the capitalism, and fossil fuels. And they're almost equally a third. The first solution is natural climate solution, which can solve about a third of the climate crisis. The second one is a system change. We need to change the system, the way we live, the way we operate, the way we value things, and the way we measure things as success. And very important, we need to keep the fossil fuels in the ground. Oil, gas, coal, and also biomass. Don't burn wood. So let's have a quick look at nature, and there's a really cool video. It's actually my most favorite video with Greta about natural climate solutions.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protests. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about. But what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. A tree is an example of a natural climate solution. Mangroves, peat bogs, jungles, marshes, seabeds, kelp forests, swamps, coral reefs, they take carbon out of the air and lock it away. Nature is a tool we can use to repair our broken climate. These natural climate solutions could make a massive difference.
Pretty cool, right?
But only if we also leave fossil fuels in the ground.
Here's the crazy part. Right now, we are ignoring them. We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now where we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore, and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
So this was the first part, the first third of the solution, right? Natural climate solutions. What do we need to do? Protect the stuff we still have, restore the stuff we've destroyed, and fund nature and natural climate solutions. Where do we get the money from? From the subsidies of fossil fuels. We're spending about, since the last COP, I think we're spending, have I wrote this down? No. We're spending, I think, $30 billion of taxpayer money worldwide to subsidize fossil fuels. We don't need more money, we just need to stop subsidizing bad stuff and take that money and subsidize good stuff. That's what we need to do. The second part is the system change, not climate change. Where do we need to go? This is a whole presentation by itself. It's basically, we need to go from a linear economy, take, make, and throw away, to a circular economy. Make, use, and recycle. That every bit, everything we use, keep getting recycled. Nothing gets thrown away. And we need to get to such a system. Another system is called donut economy, where we have to stay within the planetary boundaries, where we don't use more from nature that nature can't regenerate. Right now, globally, I think in May is the day of the year where we used up all the resources that nature can regenerate. And from May till December, we're using more stuff that won't get generated. It's gone forever. And that keeps going, keeps happening earlier. So I'm going to speed up a lot because I only have 5 minutes left. Who is the third? The third problem or the third solution is keep it in the ground, oil, gas, coal. Who are the biggest company? These guys, ExxonMobil, Chevron, PetroChina, Saudi Aramco. These guys are spending $200 billion every year to make sure that we don't act. They do propaganda, publicity campaigns, they try to slow us down because they're making billions of money from selling the coal, oil, and gas. How much of those companies, how much of their money are they investing in renewable energies, like wind, solar, geothermal, or hydroelectric powers? 0.8%. Remember, we need to get rid of this within the next 30 years. Zero. They're not doing it by themselves. and the governments are not helping, we need to put pressure on these corporations